Hello and welcome to Talk the Walk. I'm Azam Khan. As China reopens and shifts from zero COVID policy, its macroeconomic initiatives, flow of goods, and people are reignited. This is a relief for other economies, and many economists are upgrading their previously gloomy outlooks for the global economy. Take the ASEAN, China's biggest trading partner, and China in turn is a top trading partner for 8 of ASEAN's 10 countries. Tourism is one example that will provide an initial boost. But ongoing aggressive geopolitics by the United States, from tech chips to containment policies, add to uncertainties for 2023. Here to add clarity to the fog is a distinguished professor and Edward W. Carter Chair in Business Administration at the University of California, Los Angeles, Christopher Tang. Professor, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start with the holistic US-China relations and the fragility of it, especially when you take something like a balloon that can derail a visit from Anthony Blinken to the country. So how do you see these two major economies leading global growth without letting competition override the cooperation?
Well, this is a very difficult question. So let me preface by saying that the following. The geopolitical tension between the United States and China is a bit worrisome right now. I think there's mistrust, miscommunication, and misunderstanding between both countries. So I think for starters, I think both countries need to maybe perhaps to hit the reset button, to rethink how to engage each other, maybe through a strategy of détente, like what Henry Kissinger has done in 1970s. So I think both countries need to rethink about the good old days, starting from the 1978 when the economic reform, when China opened up, and how the economic trade, the relationship benefited both countries. Yes, the United States, the trade actually helped China to elevate the poverty for over 1 billion people. That is remarkable over a short period of time. At the same time, United States also gained a lot by outsourcing from China so that the consumers can get cheaper products. Now, those are good old days. Now, I think that this old couple need to think about the future. There's some challenges, definitely, like any relationship. I think it's better for both parties to really come up with a heart-to-heart discussion, how to actually take on the leadership role for the world to actually solve some of the world's biggest problems. Right now, I think both countries are thinking about zero-sum game. Either I win, you lose, or you win, I lose. That should not be the right mindset. I think they need to think about, make sure that peace is the fundamental principle that both countries must keep. Then the world is facing a lot of challenges, such as extreme climate conditions, world hunger, green economy, healthcare. I think both countries can play a very critical role to actually have to show the world that these two countries can actually play an important role to make that happen. So I think instead of focusing on the negative side, let's focus on what both countries can do to make the world become better. Yes, there are some areas they need to reconcile, or even some cases may not be reconcilable. It's fine. Then they can actually say, well, this area, we will just do our way to compete, which is perfectly fine. But I think having a more diplomatic discussion in a more calm manner, that will go a long way.
Actually, a U.S. Ex-Chief of the Treasury, Henry Paulson, echoed recently what you're saying, which is that Washington's pursuit of decoupling with China is a lose-lose situation for both. And he was stressing it in an article that that they should rethink their strategy with that and focus on where they can find commonality. So you agree with basically what he said on that, right?
Absolutely. I think that this is very consistent with the French financial minister Bruno Le Maire. He was thinking in the world game, China must be in, China cannot be out. Having that mindset will go a long way. Then the question is how can US and China to work together, to work on areas that they can really make a difference, and then there are some other areas they can actually go their own way, which is perfectly fine. This is just like any old couple. They have to focus on the children. Maybe there's certain areas that the husband they do like to do play golf, and maybe the wife would like to play bridge, which is perfectly fine. So I think they need to learn how to live together.
Right. So how does obviously the high-tech chips and semiconductor chips, and then things like security are sensitive issues for the United States towards its containment towards China, but these affect the global supply chains that'll affect the things that you say that they should find the commonality in, which is in cooperation and with regards to healthcare, and also for the economy, for the developing economies and for Asian economies to bounce back. It requires these supply chains to China to be able to thrive, basically. But then these sort of sensitive points disrupt that. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, right now I understand that US try to isolate China from the advanced semiconductor manufacturing. So, for example, I think that's United States convinced the Dutch company ASML to stop providing China for the high-end, more advanced technology, such as the EUV, the extreme ultraviolet lithography equipment to make the nano chips. But now, so this one, the narrative is that this U.S. would like to concern about China may use this kind of chips for military purposes. But chips are really generic kind of product. It can be used for good things and maybe some not so good things. But I think that we need to keep that in mind. This is a technology that can be used for anything. So it could be good or bad. So this is very difficult under control. Now, having said that, yes, right now US try to block it, but then for how long? Chinese has a lot of scientists. If you look at the STEM area, Chinese, in terms of universities and the students and the researchers, they are making a lot of progress very quickly. So in that case, yes, it will hold China back in terms of the production of the nano chips as well as the 5G rollout. But China will catch up. It's only a matter of time. When, I do not know. Now, what if one day China actually caught up, maybe even lead the world in this high-tech area? Well, what if China would say, well, it's payback time. So maybe China will block US has some access to some of the new technology. So don't you think that this is a lose-lose situation? And right now, on top of that, even US now, they're investing $52 billion on the CHIPS Act to get Intel as well as TSMC to develop factories in US, which is perfectly fine. But at the same time, US still need some other equipment as well as basic materials from many countries, including China. For example, the neon gas. Neon gas, China produces 30% of the world's supply of neon gas because it's a byproduct in the steel manufacturing. The rest, 40%, are produced in Ukraine because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, so the production is disrupted. So right now there's a shortage of neon gas. So I think that right now, I think that the world needs each other. Instead of dividing the different countries, is not going to make the world progress further. So right now we slow down everyone.
Professor, I wanted to ask you, with a cooling global demand, is export weakness in Asia expected to be a big drag? And will this primarily just be offset by Chinese tourism as it opens up? Or is there more to that China can offer as it opens up, in the short term at least?
Well, good question. I think that right now, I think that the news that came out yesterday, the global trade between US and China did not go down. Actually, it just broke a new record. It was $690 billion Now, some of them is because of inflation, so the dollar value went up. Maybe the total volume did not go up. Now, that's point number one. Point number two is that the trade between China and ASEAN is growing really, really, really fast. So right now, actually, China is trading with ASEAN over $800 billion, even surpass what they're trading with the US. So in that case, things are still going well. So it's not as green as more people want to project. And also China also trading with Mexico also going up now. But then the question is, what does it mean for China to catch up with the economic slowdown recently? Then there are many things China should consider to do. First, for internal economic growth, I think that the Chinese governments need to consider some stimulus packages. Right now, I don't think that the Chinese government is spending enough. It's only spending a few $100 billion. It's not enough. Now, US may went overboard with $5 trillion. Now, but I think that right now the Chinese government can actually generate some stimulus plan like what they did in 2009. After the financial meltdown, China actually introduced a stimulus plan, so providing subsidies for manufacturers in China and also consumers, such that consumers can buy the goods that were manufactured in China, such as home appliances, television, mobile phones, to stimulate the domestic economic growth. Point number one. Point number two is that the Chinese government actually is about time to rethink how to capture more tax dollars from the rich class. So this includes the tax reform. Right now, China is one of the very few countries in the world that has virtually no property tax. And also, there's no capital gain tax. So I think that Chinese government need to capture this kind of tax dollars and use these tax dollars to improve the healthcare system. Especially, we learned that in terms of the healthcare system, is not sufficient to take care of the citizens if the next pandemic will arrive anytime soon. So therefore, that is internal economic growth that the Chinese government needs to consider. Now, for external, there's also other new opportunities. Right now, Liu He went to Davos and declared that China is open up for the economy and welcome foreign investors. Very good. And also declared that the regulations on the high-tech companies in China is over. That is also very promising. But I think that last few years, I think that a lot of foreign investors, they got a little bit surprised by the sudden shift in policies. So I think it's very important for the governments to make maybe a clearer statement, which area they would truly have given a more open, which area they still have certain regulations. For example, although it was said that
sorry,
some
Professor.
high-tech companies...
I'm so sorry, Professor.
Yes.
I'm going to have to pause you right there just for a few moments while we take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Professor Tang. Thank you. Welcome back to Talk the Walk. I'm speaking with Christopher Tang, Distinguished Professor at UCLA. Professor, I wanted to ask you, with China's close off, Southeast Asia's supply chains were able to benefit during that time. The manufacturing was able to benefit a little bit more. But ultimately, as China reopens now, like the intricacy, the nuances of China's supply chain cannot be matched. So do you suspect that that'll go back to its what it was doing before? But at the same time, it's good that the Southeast Asian supply chain was able to benefit.
Yes, I think the momentum has started. I think that's probably, in terms of China, can resume some of the operations, but some of them is already shifted to Vietnam, to India, and whatnot. For example, Foxconn and Apple, during the COVID lockdown, then they decided for them to have a reliable supply of the product, they have to diversify the supply base. So I think that the momentum has already started. And also in the US is also trying to encourage companies to source more products from the ASEAN countries. But that directly, actually, the total volume from China to US has declined, but actually from China to ASEAN went up in terms of the exports. But then all these ASEAN countries, they imported products from China and reassemble it and ship it to US. So therefore, China is in terms of the role in the supply chain has changed a little bit, but the total volume of the Chinese trade between China and the United States is not going to go down anytime soon. But in terms of continue to grow at the really double-digit growth, I think it's unlikely.
Right. Like you mentioned, it had gone up in the past 1 year, which recently was revealed. But it actually, what you just said, it bodes well for China because I'm not sure if you're aware, but like recently the Chinese State Council came out and reiterated its plan to increase the quality of its manufacturing, increase the quality of its goods and services for the years to come through their initiatives.
Well, I think that China has also changed because before China focused on the more low labor costs and also in terms of mass production. But I think right now, also China is thinking about maybe to gradually shift from the manufacturing economy to a little bit on the service economy. So right now, I think that China is also making really big, great progress in robotics, in AI, blockchain, digital economy. So I think that that could be another way to actually do to stimulate economic growth and also that to actually move up the value chain to become more high value added economy as well.
Right, and I also want to speak about the RCEP aspect of it as China's, now that it's reopened up again, it's going to resume its leadership role and to be able to push its initiatives with the RCEP being the largest free trade bloc in the world, which Hong Kong also recently subscribed to.
Yes, the RCEP is really a fantastic development. It was China actually took a leadership role in 2020 with 15 countries, such that they have a certain free trade agreements with the members. So that actually facilitates what I said earlier to actually for these ASEAN countries to import the parts, some of the products from China with free trade. And then at the same time, now President Biden pushed for the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework in 2022. There was also a very similar set of ASEAN countries, such that eventually they also get a free trade agreement between all these ASEAN countries with the United States. So this trigger a new supply chain configuration, meaning that is the China will ship the parts to ASEAN countries duty-free, and then from the ASEAN countries, they do the value-added activities and ship it to the United States also duty-free. So as a result, this is really making a free trade agreement. So this helps the ASEAN countries to be the winners because they are benefiting from both sides. They're benefiting from the relationship with China and also they benefit from the relationship with the United States as well.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Do you think that there's an aspect of that also that can be applied to the Gulf region as well? Obviously, the chief executive of Hong Kong is there right now. President Xi Jinping just came back from there, and they've reprioritized their relationship, the Saudi Arabian Kingdom and China. So how would that play into the dynamics as well?
Well, I think this is a very philosophical. I think that in terms of most Asians, they don't see things in absolute terms. It's always relative. Everyone is friends and there's no enemy. So, but this relationship is just it's a gray area. There's no absolute good, no absolute bad. So I think that's in terms of this kind of diplomatic relationship is the right format. Now with the Gulf, I think that China needs the oil from the Gulf. And also that's at the same time, and the Gulf also needs something from the Gulf countries like the Saudi, because I think right now China is really leading in some of the technologies such as robotics, as well as the drones and AI and blockchain. And I think this could also benefit the Gulf countries as well. Especially, I think that they would also like to learn more about the agriculture technology, such as using drones for the precision farming and also vertical farming in the Gulf countries as well.
It also diversifies their foreign direct investments into China from the Chinese perspective, having the Gulf countries.
Absolutely. So I think that in 2021, the Gulf trade with China $88 billion. It's still a small amount, but this can change. But I think that in terms of, yes, foreign direct investment, China needs it. So right now, besides the Gulf, I think that's actually China has also introduced new measures. Last week in Fujian province, China is opening up 2 industrial zones that will try to attract foreign direct investments from those Chinese diasporas from Indonesia and from the Philippines, because that's this kind of entrepreneurs, they also like to have stronger ties with China as well. So I think that China is also trying to leverage the lot of over 14 million overseas Chinese. And many of them, they have a business. And I think that this is a great opportunity for them to really reconnect with some of the overseas Chinese to bring in additional investment as well.
So all in all, do you see Asian markets and Asian economies thriving and outperforming in 2023 as China reopens up?
I hope so, because I think right now, I think that this is very interesting dynamics. You look at the developing countries, like the ASEAN countries, also in Eastern Europe. When they go to Eastern Europe, they love all the Chinese products. Here's why: because they are good quality and they're cheap. So then they say, well, they're not political. They need a good cell phones. The Huawei cell phone, Oppo cell phone, Xiaomi cell phone is very popular in Poland, in some other countries as well. So similarly, for the ASEAN countries, they cannot afford to buy the Apple phone. It's too expensive. But then there are a lot of really high quality Chinese mobile phones, Chinese technology is really affordable and accessible as well. So in the case, this will also bring up the economy of the ASEAN countries. So I feel that yes, right now the tension between United States and China is a little bit tense, but actually by having this RCEP as well as the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework actually elevates the opportunities for ASEAN countries to really develop economies much faster.
Professor, on that note, I'll stop you right there. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you the same time next week. Goodbye.